Imagine a world where a single decision unleashes a cascade of destruction so profound that it echoes through generations, crippling a once mighty nation not just for years, but for a century. Picture the stark reality: hundreds of thousands of young lives snuffed out on frozen battlefields, economies shattered under the weight of sanctions, and a population dwindling into oblivion, haunted by the ghosts of war. These aren't scenes from a dystopian novel. They're the brutal numbers emerging from Russia's invasion of Ukraine, numbers so devastating that experts whisper of a recovery timeline stretching far beyond our lifetimes. What if I told you that behind the headlines of territorial gains and military posturing lies a story of irreversible loss, where the cost of ambition has doomed a country to demographic and economic purgatory? Hold on tight as we dive into the data that paints a picture of a Russia teetering on the brink, a nation whose wounds may never fully heal. Hello everyone, welcome back to the Impact Report. If you're new here, please subscribe to my channel for in-depth analyses on global events that shape our world. Hit that bell icon so you never miss an update. Today we're unpacking those brutal numbers that suggest Russia might not recover for 100 years. Breaking it down step by step to understand the full scope of this catastrophe. From the outside, Russia has always projected an image of unyielding strength, a vast landmass sprawling across 11 time zones, bordered by the frozen Arctic to the north and the volatile Caucasus to the south, with its exterior facade built on a reputation of military might and resource dominance. But the invasion of Ukraine has cracked this veneer like never before. Sanctions from the West have isolated Russia economically, severing ties with the world's wealthiest markets and advanced technologies. According to declassified intelligence, Russia's GDP has slipped out of the top 10 global economies, now smaller than Canada's or Italy's, a humiliating drop for a country that once boasted the second strongest military. The exterior damage is evident in the frozen assets, over $300 billion in reserves locked away, and the exodus of international companies, from McDonald's to ExxonMobil, leaving behind empty storefronts and idle factories. Europe's rush to divest from Russian energy has cost Moscow billions. Projections show losses of 27 to 34 billion in 2024 alone from reduced gas exports. This external isolation isn't just financial, it's diplomatic too, with Russia alienated from global forums, its UN veto power increasingly seen as a relic of a bygone era. The war has exposed the fragility of Russia's external alliances. China and India may buy discounted oil, but they offer no lifeline for high-tech imports like semiconductors, crucial for modern weaponry. Visually, the exterior of Russia today looks like a fortress under siege. Borders fortified yet porous to immigrants fleeing conscription, skies patrolled by aging aircraft, and ports bustling with shadow fleets dodging sanctions. The brutal numbers here are staggering. Over 370,000 skilled professionals have fled since 2022, draining the brainpower needed to rebuild. This external battering has ripple effects, turning Russia's once imposing silhouette into a shadow of vulnerability, where every sanction tightens the noose around its global standing. As the world watches, this exterior decay signals a deeper rot, one that could take generations to mend, with economists warning that reintegration into the global economy might require wholesale regime change and reparations totaling trillions. The invasion, meant to showcase strength, has instead highlighted weaknesses, from supply chain disruptions to currency devaluation. The ruble halved in value early on, fueling inflation that bites into everyday lives. Externally, Russia's image as an energy superpower crumbles as alternatives like LNG from Qatar and renewables in Europe rise, leaving its pipelines idle and its influence waning. This isn't temporary. Reports suggest that the structural shifts in global trade could sideline Russia for decades. Much like post-Dudui isolation lingered for the Soviet Union, the exterior, once a symbol of expansionism, now bears the scars of overreach. With borders that feel more like barriers to progress than gateways to power, inside Russia, the interior landscape is a pressure cooker of discontent and control, where the war's toll manifests in suppressed voices and strained social fabrics. Demographic crises loom large, with fertility rates below replacement levels exacerbated by the loss of military-age males, Estimates peg casualties at 200,000 to 315,000 killed or wounded, removing a generation from the workforce and family life. Emigration has hollowed out cities, leaving behind aging populations and labor shortages that drive up wages but cripple industries. Politically, the interior is fortified by propaganda and repression, yet cracks show in rising protests and economic hardships, with inflation at double digits and food prices soaring. This internal strain, though often hidden from view, is shortening the nation's lifespan, as healthcare systems buckle under war demands and COVID's lingering effects claim over 1 million excess deaths. When it comes to performance, Russia's military machine, once touted as a juggernaut, has stuttered dramatically on the Ukrainian stage. Pre-invasion, the ground forces numbered around 360,000, but declassified U.S. intelligence reveals that nearly 90% of those troops have been expended through death, injury, or exhaustion. The attritional tactics, human wave assaults in places like Bakhmut and Avdiivka, have yielded minimal gains at enormous cost, with daily casualties averaging 1,000 in recent months. Equipment losses are equally brutal: over 420 tanks destroyed, 3 or 14 armored vehicles gone, and 262 aircraft downed, forcing Russia to dip into Soviet-era stockpiles that are decades old and prone to failure. Performance metrics paint a grim picture. Missile inventories depleted by 80%, with improvised weapons using nuclear components highlighting desperation. Economically, the war economy boosts short-term GDP by 2.6% in 2023, but at the expense of civilian sectors. Military spending now consumes 6% of GDP, diverting funds from infrastructure and education. On the battlefield, performance has been hampered by poor logistics, corruption in procurement, and low morale, leading to mutinies and desertions. The vaunted modernization efforts of the past 15 years lie in ruins, as recruits, often convicts or unwilling civilians, lack training, resulting in high turnover and ineffective operations. Long-term, this performance dip means Russia may struggle to project power beyond its borders, with NATO assessments noting that rebuilding conventional forces could take a decade or more amid sanctions. The numbers here are unforgiving, up to 1 million total casualties when including the wounded, a figure that dwarfs Soviet losses in Afghanistan and echoes WDY's 27 million dead, distorting demographics for generations. Performance in the economic arena fares no better, with growth propped up by oil sales to Asia but undermined by technological isolation. No access to Western chips means stunted innovation in everything from drones to satellites. As the war drags on, performance indicators trend downward, with labor shortages forcing factories to operate at reduced capacity and inflation eroding purchasing power. This isn't the blitzkrieg Putin envisioned. It's a grinding slog that's exposing systemic flaws, from command structures riddled with incompetence to a reliance on quantity over quality that's failing spectacularly. Analysts predict that even if the war ends tomorrow, Russia's military performance rating would require years of investment to recover. Investment that's scarce in a sanctioned economy. The brutal truth is that performance has been Russia's Achilles heel, turning what was supposed to be a swift operation into a quagmire that's bleeding the nation dry. Safety features, in the context of Russia's national security apparatus, were designed to shield the homeland from threats, but the Ukraine conflict has tested and found them wanting. The vaunted air defense systems like the S-400 have proven vulnerable to Ukrainian drones and HIMARS strikes, with key installations hit deep inside Russian territory. Nuclear deterrence remains the ultimate safety net, but conventional defenses have crumbled, border regions face shelling, and Black Sea fleets have lost flagships like the Moskva. Intelligence failures at the outset underestimated Ukrainian resistance, leading to exposed supply lines and ambushes. Domestically, safety measures include draconian laws against dissent, but these have bred internal instability. With sabotage and unrest rising, the numbers underscore the inadequacy: over 100,000 troops killed or wounded in 2023 alone, per UK estimates, highlighting how safety protocols failed to protect personnel. Cyber defenses have held somewhat, but economic safety nets are fraying. Sovereign wealth funds depleting by 2030 at current rates, leaving little buffer against shocks. In terms of population safety, the demographic hit is a slow, burning threat, with low birth rates and high mortality creating a vulnerable society prone to pandemics and labor crises. Military reforms post-2008 aim to enhance safety through professionalization, but mobilization has reverted to conscript hordes, increasing risks of mutiny and inefficiency. Safety and energy security is compromised too, as Western divestment forces reliance on unstable partners. Overall, these features, once Russia's pride, now appear outdated, unable to safeguard against the multifaceted threats of modern warfare and global isolation. What sets Russia apart, its unique selling points, have long been its vast natural resources, strategic geography, and resilient culture. But the war is eroding these edges. Hydrocarbons account for 40% of exports, but sanctions have slashed revenues, forcing discounts to buyers like China, diminishing the USP of energy leverage. Geopolitically, the Arctic holdings and Eurasian pivot offer unique positioning, yet climate change and isolation reduce their value. Culturally, the stoic endurance of the Russian people is legendary, but mass emigration of the educated elite, over 700 zalzm in some estimates, strips away innovation, leaving a less dynamic society. The military's USP of sheer mass has backfired in attritional warfare, while space and cyber capabilities once unique are now matched or surpassed. In global influence, Russia's veto in the UN and alliances in Brises provide uniqueness. But the war has tarnished its image as a counterweight to the West. Economically, the USP of cheap labor and resources attracts investment, but risks from instability deter it. These points, brutalized by conflict, may take decades to reclaim, as competitors like Saudi Arabia in oil or the US in tech pull ahead. The price of this war is astronomical, far beyond initial calculations, encompassing human, economic, and societal costs that could total trillions. Direct military expenditures have ballooned to $100 billion annually, draining budgets and fueling inflation at 20%. Human price up to 1.35 million fighting-age males lost per some reports, equating to 1% of the population and billions in lost productivity. Each death costs 14.5 million rubles in payouts alone. Economic price includes 1% GDP contraction in 2022, with long-term forecasts of stagnation. Oil revenues down 50% due to price caps. Societal price manifests in poverty spikes and infrastructure neglect, while environmental costs from battlefield devastation add unseen billions. Globally, the price Russia pays in isolation could delay recovery by a century, as rebuilding trust and economies requires Herculean efforts. In conclusion, these brutal numbers, casualties in the hundreds of thousands, demographic declines projecting a population drop to 125 million by 2050, economic isolation costing billions annually, paint a portrait of a Russia irreparably harmed by its own ambitions. The exterior isolation, internal strains, faltering performance, inadequate safety, eroded unique points and exorbitant price all converge to suggest a recovery horizon of at least decades, if not a century. As the world moves forward, Russia risks being left behind, a cautionary tale of hubris. Thank you for watching the Impact Report. Subscribe, like, and share your thoughts below. Stay informed, stay impactful.